Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality. Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry. If you've been listening for any period of time now, you know that every guest that I've had on the show has given amazing interviews and so much incredible amounts of information to share with us. And today is no exception. So today I've got my friend Blaine Barcus on the show. And what I love about talking with Blaine today is that he has been in multiple facets of the music industry throughout his career, which is a lot of what I do as well. So, you know, some weeks we have people on that do one or two things, maybe three or four. And today, Blaine has a lot of stuff that we get to talk about, which is great. So Blaine has been a tour manager for Third Day and Mark Schultz. He's been an artist manager. He's been a touring drummer. He's been a live event producer. And now he is a record label A&R executive for Provident label group in Franklin, Tennessee. So he works specifically in the Christian music market. But it doesn't just work in Christian music. It also works in the mainstream market as well. It's across the board. So he has worked with, again, like artists like Third Day, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Mark Schultz, Zach Williams, Matthew West, some of these amazing artists like that. So I'm excited for you to sit back and listen to our conversation today as we talk about A&R and touring and just all of these types of things today. Hey, everybody. We are here hanging out with my good friend, Mr. Blaine Barcus. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. It is good to see you. We haven't seen each other
I know it's been a while.
A long, long time.
Yep.
We used to go to church together years ago at a church called Ecclesia over at the factory here in Franklin.
Right.
And then everybody kind of went their own way, and people kind of lose touch over the years. Like we still see each other over Facebook and things like that, but Facebook and social media kind of give the illusion of always being connected to each other, but you still haven't seen each other in 15 years.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Or 14, whatever. Right. You know, so it's cool to reconnect. Yeah. And, you know, I've kept up with you over the years and seeing what all you're doing, the amazing work that you get to do in Christian music and with you work at Provident Label Group. You're the vice president of A&R. So for our listeners to know, that's what you do. That's currently what you're doing. Right. I want to get into kind of your history of how you got into music to begin with. But real quick, just for listeners, can you explain to people what A&R stands for and what that job entails? Just real briefly. We'll get into more detail on it in a little bit. But
Sure. Yeah. The title A&R stands for Artists and Repertoire, which is basically artists and songs. So it's an old record label title that's been around for decades. I equate the role as kind of like an account executive in some ways. So to simplify what I do, there's two parts of my job. There's about 20, 25 artists that are signed to our record label, and I manage about half of those, roughly 9 or 10 artists at a time. And it's my job to be the main creative person that interacts with the artist on behalf of all their content, especially on the audio side, the recordings. So it's my job to help an artist develop if they're a brand new artist, find people to co-write with them, figure out their sound if they don't quite know yet. Basically helping them pick songs and find the right co-writers, ultimately help them discover who's going to produce their project, whether it be an EP or an album. So it's kind of a part business, part creative role. Yeah. So there's that part of it with the existing roster that I'm responsible for. And then there's kind of the talent scout side of what I do, which is out going to shows, listening to demos, looking for artists to potentially sign to our label.
Yeah.
So it's a super fun job. I've been doing it for a long time, and I still love it.
Yeah.
So
How many years have you been doing that job here?
Well, I've been in A&R since 2001, so almost 18 years. And then I've been here for 15 years.
Okay.
So in January, it'll be 15 years here at Provident.
Wow.
So,
That's awesome.
Crazy.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Let's backtrack just a little bit and just kind of give us, the audience, a history of who Blaine Barcus is, where you came from, and how you got into music to begin with.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri. I grew up in a great family. My parents were just fans of pop music. I grew up as a kid, listening to their records, listening to the radio, and just really from an early age, I just loved music. I loved how it made me feel. I just enjoyed it. It was probably the thing I enjoyed the most when I was a kid. And even as I continued to grow up. I guess my 5th grade year in school, when I was 10, they started offering instrumental music at my local public school. And they offered drums. And I was like, man, I want to play drums. And so I talked to my parents, and we walked down to the local music shop, and my dad rented me a snare drum, and they enrolled me in music lessons. And so I just started taking snare drum lessons as a 5th grader. And I kind of just had some natural ability early on. And my parents just really encouraged it. I think my dad bought me my first used drum kit when I was in 6th or 7th grade. I started taking some private lessons. I started getting in these kind of honors bands and, symphonic band, and I just loved it. It kind of became my thing. I was a pretty average athlete, growing up as a kid, but music was something I kind of excelled at and just really had a passion for. So started playing in rock bands in high school, cover bands, kids 16, 15 years old playing covers, and from Tom Petty to the Stones to Beatles to, pop and rock kind of stuff. Some originals, but mostly covers. Had a blast doing that. And of course, played in school bands, marching band, jazz band, all that kind of stuff. I graduated from high school, and I thought, I love music, but that seemed like, just to have a career in music seemed like that people just don't do that. That doesn't seem very practical. So I just went off to my state school, University of Missouri, and enrolled in school, and just really didn't have any really career aspirations. Just figured I need to go to college and do something. So pledged a fraternity right away. Went straight from high school and moved into a fraternity house, which was crazy. Looking back now on it, I ask my parents why the heck they let me do that. But, it was really looking back on it now, kind of a providential thing. My sophomore year of college, there was a guy in my house that was a really on fire Christian. And he was an evangelist. And we became friends, and I started kind of watching his life, and he was leading these Wednesday night Bible studies. And I thought, okay, what, a Bible study? That seems kind of weird to do in college and in a fraternity. But this guy just loved Jesus, and I thought he was a great guy. And long story short, he ended up kind of leading me to Christ.
Oh, that's awesome.
When I was a sophomore, when I was 20 years old. So I really didn't grow up on any kind of Christian music. I just loved music, rock, pop, that kind of stuff. So that when I became a believer, that's kind of how I started to learn a little bit about what Christian music was, and started to find artists that I really liked and inspired me. And from Amy to Michael W. Smith and Stephen Curtis Chapman, and then DC Talk and some of those artists. I just really thought they were making great quality music, and plus lyrically, it was just ministering to me personally.
Yeah.
So anyway, finished my degree in college. A liberal arts degree in communications. Still not knowing what I was going to do with my life and my new faith. Moved home to St. Louis. Kind of just started bouncing around in some jobs. I worked in marketing, sales, in the advertising industry for a while. Then I worked in the healthcare industry. I was recruiting physicians to work in hospital emergency departments. All the while, my music side of my life was more involved in just church and worship teams, and still playing a little bit. In the midst of all this, I have a younger brother, 6 years younger, who came here to Nashville to go to Belmont. So I started visiting him a little bit and seeing what was going on in Nashville in music. And really just was kind of followed my brother here, honestly. My younger brother in 96, I moved here. And by this time, he had gone to Belmont and then kind of dropped out to go on tour and never went back. And his touring life kind of took off. And really it was through my brother's network of friends and work associates that I was able to kind of plug in, because he knew a lot of people by the time I moved here. So my first job was I started on the road as a tour manager. There was a band from Atlanta called Third Day that was just starting out. They were literally still in a van and a trailer, playing all over the Southeast. and they needed a tour manager. And by this time, I'd been out of college for 7 or 8 years, so I had some good business experience and some professional experience. And the manager just hired me. They said, I think you can do it. You seem like a smart guy. And so I went on the road with Third Day and really just kind of learned a lot quickly on the road as a tour manager.
And that's your entrance into the music world, is getting to manage Third Day.
It was a pretty great first experience. Well, it was just a great education for me too, because literally they played 120 shows in the first 6 months.
Wow.
Lots of van rides overnight. Thankfully, they graduated to a bus eventually.
Were they signed at this point? Or
they had just signed, and their debut national album had just came out, the one with the bus on the cover. That was the first album.
Of course.
And that album took off like crazy.
Yep.
And so I road managed those guys for really, it was only 6 months, but got to know them very well on the road, and then kind of transitioned from the road to inside their management company and became their day-to-day manager. And that's really how, even though my brother had worked with Stephen Curtis Chapman, I then, they had the same management company, Creative Trust at the time. And so that's how I started working with Stephen a little bit, overseeing a lot of his live events and several other artists as well. So was kind of in the management world then for about 3.5 years, and just I enjoyed it, but the musician side of me really wanted to be more involved day to day and more the creative side of what artists do. Mm-hmm. And so I just ended up, thankfully, I got an opportunity to, actually, I left that job, went back on the road for another year and road managed for a guy named Mark Schultz, who was coming back. He was just coming out around 2000, and his first album came out and was doing really well. So I got to road manage and play drums for him on the road for about a year.
Okay.
And then in 2001 is when I got hired at Word Records in A&R. It was my first shot at A&R. At Word, I was at Word for a little over 3 years, and then in 2005, Terry Hemmings brought me over here to Provident, and this is kind of where I've been, ever since for 15 years. So that kind of a long answer to your question, but that's kind of my career journey in a nutshell.
That's good for the audience to hear the progression of what somebody goes through to get to where you are currently. Like you have to start somewhere. Now you had the privilege of starting at a really good place,
good level,
with Third Day.
Yeah.
For people who don't know Third Day's music, who are listening, they need to go Google Third Day and listen. They're a huge Christian rock band.
Sold over 10 million albums.
Yeah. So, but when they first started, and I remember when that first album came out, I was a senior in high school. 92 is when it came out. 92, or late 92, early 93.
92 or 93 would have been their independent record, but their national release was beginning of 96, actually.
Okay. I remember
with the bus.
With the bus. Yeah. So, but I remember that coming out, and that was a huge influence. I mean, all those artists were on my life as well. So the fact that you got to start at that baseline, that's
really fortunate.
That's a high bar to start, and just to go forward from that. And most people don't get that opportunity to start quite there. So I usually reserve kind of what do you give advice for later on towards the end of the interview, but we're kind of here, so let's talk about it. What would you tell somebody that wants to get into road managing? I mean, most people aren't going to start with Third Day or something like that. They're going to start on a smaller level with indie artists, kind of, their hometown or their region, that kind of thing. But what would you tell somebody who's wanting to get into that? I want to road manage some artists. How do I find somebody to work with? What might be a quick thing on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. You could start a couple places. You could start, you're right, with an independent artist on the road. I think first of all, let me say this. Here's some of the skills I think that are required for being a good road manager, a good tour manager. Sure. You got to have some organizational skills. You got to be fairly organized. You have to be able to juggle a lot of balls at one time. Because you're interacting. The great thing about being a tour manager is you interact with almost every facet of the music industry, because you're interacting obviously with artists, you're interacting with concert promoters, you're interacting with booking agents, you're interacting with artist managers, you're interacting with people from the record label, maybe a publicist. You're interacting with, maybe a bus company or some kind of transportation entity. You're interacting with production companies, audio, lighting, sound engineers, crew people. You're really touching almost everything, which was amazing for me, because I got I was coming into this at that time I was 30 or 31 years old, so I wasn't super young. So I had a lot of professional business experience, but I hadn't worked in music, so to speak. So I got a great 101 education quickly by being a tour manager. Yeah. So how do you get there? I think a good way is to start managing or road managing maybe an independent artist who's out there touring would be great. Another route would be start out as a merchandise manager on a tour.
Okay.
People are always looking for responsible, organized people that can go out and sell merchandise and manage merchandise for an artist on the road.
Okay.
I see that as kind of a good entry level thing.
And who do you approach if somebody wants to work in merch doing that? Do you go to the management company? Like who would you approach to do that?
Yeah, if it's a signed artist with a manager, I would go to the manager and let them know who you are and what your skill level is and what you've done and that kind of thing. And a lot of times it doesn't take a lot of past experience to do that job, but somehow you got to prove that you have good people skills and that you're organized and you're good with money.
Yeah.
Got to have those skills.
Sure.
People skills, because you're going to interact with the artist, the road manager, and you're going to interact with local salespeople at each venue.
Yeah.
Most of those will probably be volunteer.
Yeah.
People.
And the audience.
And the audience. Exactly. So you're kind of representing the artist when you're standing at that merchandise table selling their T-shirts and their CDs and their photos and posters and whatever. You're kind of a representative for the artist.
Yeah.
So if you're not a pleasant person or you got bad people skills, that's a reflection of the artist. They're not going to keep you around very long. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like a salesperson out there for the artist. So if you can be really good at that, usually other people on the road are going to notice your skills and your abilities. And I think there's a lot of transferable skills to then grow into maybe an assistant tour manager on a large tour.
Okay.
Or a tour manager on a smaller tour. Kind of work your way up. So.
Okay.
I always feel like merchandise is a great way for anybody to get into the industry.
Okay, that's great to hear because people wouldn't normally think of that as being a good entry way into road
especially
managing.
when you're if you're starting out and you're on the younger side, maybe you're early mid 20s and you're still single, and hey, I can just go on the road. You know, hopefully my cost of living is low and I can go on the road and be gone for a few weeks at a time, and that lifestyle is fairly doable early on. So.
Now, you're married and you have a family.
Right.
So were you married when you were road managing at that point?
I was single when I got here, and I was single when I tour managed Third Day, and then I got married when I was artist manager at Creative Trust.
Okay.
So, but then actually when I did go back out with Mark Schultz for a year, I was newly married, no kids.
Okay.
And that was doable because there weren't no kids yet, and my wife was working, and so we made it work. I was never gone for super long periods of time.
So let's talk about that for a second, because one of the things that I'm married and I have a family, and people ask me all the time, it's like, how do you do music for a living? I mean, I do a bunch of different things that allow me to do it, but being married and having a kid, and you're away from home, like, are you always away from your family? And like, well, I'm fortunate. I've been blessed that most of the time they get to go with me, unless I'm doing a fly date or something like that, and I have to be gone for a few days. But if we're driving, which I prefer to do, then they get to go with me. We homeschool our daughter, and so that makes it really easy for us. And my wife works from home as well, so that makes it easy for us. But that's not always the case for people. You have this job, your wife has another job, even though you don't have kids at this point. But how did that work for you guys at that point? When you're out on the road and it's just you and her, but you don't get to be with each other very often. That first year is a very important year. How did that kind of work for you?
Yeah, it worked. It worked for a while, fine. I mean, I think the longest I was ever gone was maybe a 2-week run.
Okay.
And that, be home.
That's not bad.
Yeah, be home for a few days. I was never gone for, hey, I'm gone for a month or anything like that. But you know what? A lot of people are. A lot of people are, regardless of genre. Gone for weeks upon a time, or even gone for a month or two. Especially if you're leaving the country, of course.
Yeah.
So the road is. It's a challenging lifestyle. It depends on what your priorities are in life too. If you're married and you got kids and you want to try to maintain a great marriage and be a great parent, it's hard to be gone all the time. Yeah. I mean, it's really a struggle and can be really hard on relationships.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most people, at least that I know, can do it for a season, and then eventually they need to figure out how to phase into something else.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, do you guys have to, and not to pry into personal details of your life, but did you guys have to figure out ahead of time, like, okay, I've been offered this opportunity to go back out on the road and road manage this artist for a year or however long it's going to be, do you have to sit down with your wife and kind of get a game plan together, say, okay, this is what it looks like. Are you okay with this? Am I okay with this? And kind of, you're walking into this thing together.
Yeah,
it's not like telling your wife, hey, I'm going to go do this.
Right.
And, and good luck while I'm gone.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. I mean, you really got to talk it through, and I think be on the same page with it, at least if you want to, have a healthy
marriage.
relationship. Yeah. I think you got to talk it through, and I think the spouse has to be in it and be committed to it and be on board with it too.
Yeah.
I think in our situation, she knew it wasn't a long-term thing. I mean, honestly, when I first committed to go back out with Mark Schultz, it was only a 3-month commitment. So now it morphed into a full year. But after that year of being on the road with Mark, as great as it was, he was awesome. I had a blast doing it. My wife and I just knew that wasn't the lifestyle that we were going to lead long term. So I was already, after a year, I was kind of finding I was looking for, okay, what's my next thing? What's my next opportunity?
Yeah.
And thankfully, the job at Word opened up at that time. But
sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on into going to Word Records. And that was your first A&R experience, right? How did you work your way into that position? Did somebody reach out to you and say, hey, this position is open? Or did you have to work your way into that some other way?
Yeah. Yeah, well, because, it's a great question, because I had never had an A&R position before. Now, I had done management, and by this time, I think I'd, done a pretty good job at Creative Trust, and I was known in the industry for my tour managing and my artist management and that kind of thing. And I knew a lot of artists, and I knew most people in the industry. So I think when the position came open, actually my former boss at Creative Trust, Dan Rains, spoke to the A&R person that was hiring there at Word and kind of put my name in the hat and just said, hey, Blaine's been looking for something like this. He'd be great. I'm telling you, Dan had been in the industry for years and years and years. And so his recommendation was respected, and said, I believe Blaine does have the skill set, to be a great A&R person.
Sure.
Because there are some things, I will say this too. I think there are, there are a lot of managers. Managers have different styles of how they work and how they manage artists, but there are some, there's some A&R skills I think required to be a good manager too. You have to, hopefully you have at least a decent ear for songs and what, a certain level of talent and that kind of thing. So I think I had done enough A&R kinds of things as an artist manager that they just believed I could do the job. They took a chance on me, though. It was definitely a step of faith, because I had not done the job before.
Right.
But I was able to prove that I had done enough of those kinds of things, even in my management role, that they were like, okay, we're gonna hire you.
Well, and plus you've got Dan Rains recommending you,
right?
So someone who's highly trusted in the industry as well.
Exactly.
And so you've got, and we talk about this all the time with other guests, but it always comes back to relationships.
Yeah.
You've built these relationships with people over years now,
right? And
they trust you, and they know what you're capable of and what you've done in the past. And so you've got someone who's going ahead of you saying, hey, this guy's got the goods to take care of the job,
right?
Because you're a creative guy, we know that, and you're very good at business. So the relationship is really paramount.
Yeah.
In this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. You have to. Networking is important. The relationships are important. Obviously, you have to be able to do the job. But I think, because of my past track record, thankfully, several people felt comfortable putting in a word for me. So.
Yeah. Who did you work with? Like, what artists were you working with over at Word?
Yeah, it was my first day on the job. I remember I was literally introduced to my first artist that was assigned to me, and her name was Allie Rogers. She was an 18-year-old young lady from Iowa who had actually been signed by the former A&R person there, whose place I was taking, and then that person left to take a different job. And so I was introduced to her and said, hey, here's a new artist you're working with. Fantastic talent, singer-songwriter, great young lady. I worked a little bit with Salvador on a live worship record. I worked with Nicole C. Mullen on a live record. During my time there, I signed Building 429 when they were just kind of getting started.
Yep.
They had their big song Glory Defined back in the day. I think it was 2004, maybe 2003, 2004. Oh, I signed a pop punk band called Stellar Cart.
Oh yeah.
They had a good little touring business going, and they were great guys, and so they were a ton of fun to work with. Worked a little bit with Fernando Ortega.
Yep.
Back in the day, he was signed to Word.
Okay.
Really, talented writer, really great, fantastic worship leader. He was fun to work with.
And then you moved over. So you were there for what, a year? You said a year
No,
or two?
I was at Word for a little over 3 years.
Oh, 3 years.
actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I'd known Terry Hemmings for a bunch of years. I met Terry really when I first moved here in the mid '90s because Third Day was signed to Reunion Records and he was running Reunion back in the day. So that's how we initially met. And then we really didn't stay in close contact, but when he was then hired to come run Provident, I believe I lose track of the years, but I think it would have been 2003 or 4. He had been out of the industry for a few years and had come back to run Provident. And I just kind of, wrote him a note when he got the job and said, hey, man, glad you're back in the industry, and I always respected you a lot and hope things go well for you. And it was within maybe a year or so after that, he and I reconnected, and he was restructuring some things here in A&R at Provident, and he said, I really want you to come on our team and be a part of A&R. So, like I said, that was January of 2005 when I started here. And what was really exciting to me too was not only to get to work with Terry, but this is where Third Day was. And
right.
so it was really a full circle for me.
Sure.
I started out as their tour manager, and then I was their manager for a while, and I was going to work with Third Day in an A&R capacity. Yeah. So that's what was super exciting.
So now you're getting to help them find songs and build an album and
exactly
things. That's cool.
Yeah, and that was like I said, that was 2005. So that was right before the first album I worked on with them was an album called Wherever You Are, which had, one of their biggest songs, "Cry to Jesus," was on that record. So that was the first project I officially kind of A&R'd with them. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It was fun.
So, kind of going back to the beginning of our conversation, being an A&R here, what does a day-to-day look like? What's a day in the life of Blaine Barcus being an A&R vice president at Provident? Yeah, what does the day-to-day look like for you to do that?
Well, one of the things I love about the job is every day is different.
Okay.
Every day always involves music, which, hey,
yeah, what
can be better than that?
That's right.
So, let's see. Like today, it's pretty much I'm in the office most of the day. I had a lunch meeting with a guy I've known for years who does some booking. I was catching up with him, but a lot of what I've been doing here in my office today is I've got several artists that are in the middle of making projects. So I've got a brand new artist called Cain, Cain, that's recording their debut EP, and we've tracked the first 2 songs, and I'm getting rough mixes back on those songs, and so I'm listening. And I'm interacting with the artist and the producer saying, hey, this sounds great, or maybe, turn this up, or I need to hear more tambourine on the chorus or whatever, you know. So I'm analyzing a rough mix before the producer sends it off to actually be mixed by the mix engineer.
Gotcha.
I've got Matthew West in the studio right now. We're in the middle of mixing his new record. And so I've got his producer, same thing, sending me roughs on songs and then mixes on songs to approve those. And then I'm always having to keep my eyes on deadlines, because the part of my job is a balance between the creative and the business. So, are we staying on budget with the record? And then what's the deadline? When do I have to have this record mastered and ready to give to hand to our production people to actually get it sent to all the DSPs, the digital service providers, the Spotifys and the Apple Music and the Pandoras. And then also, we still sell some CDs, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So we actually have to send off the master to have CDs manufactured and the booklets printed, and because our artists do sell still quite a few CDs at their shows. A lot of our fans that go to those shows still like to buy a CD, and a lot of times I think it's it's a keepsake from the show. Maybe they get to meet the artist and the artist autographed the CD for them. So
that's the best part.
So there are deadlines. There are deadlines. There are timelines that have to be met. And so that's where the organizational piece has to come into play, where you're keeping things on schedule the best you can.
Yeah. So who sets the deadline for when an album is going to come out? Are you the guy that says we're going to release this album June 22nd of 2020, and then you have to get everything done within that time, or is there someone else that's setting that? How does that work?
That's a good question. Here at the label, we have, we've got a staff of roughly, 35, 40 people. And so my job, A&R, is a piece of that team. But, we have a huge marketing team. We have a radio team. We have 5 or 6 people that do nothing but get some of our singles played on the radio. They're on the phones calling radio stations every day, trying to get those stations to play our artists' music. And then we have a digital team that they're literally calling Apple Music and Spotify and Pandora every day, trying to get our artist songs playlisted on certain playlists and positioned, if it's a new release, positioned on certain pages. And then we have back office people that are handling all the finances and the details and the administration of everything. And so anyway, to answer your question though, usually, it's a lot of discussion on when a project is released, and it's a lot of interaction with the artist and the artist manager. And we decide, usually a cycle on a life cycle on an album or a project is roughly 18 to 24 months. Sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the artist. But so it's kind of a constant dialogue between the artist, the manager, and our team on when things come out, when music is released, and how it's released, and the timeline of that. But then there are certain. So once we kind of know, okay, we're going to put this project out on this date, then we kind of back up to see how many weeks do we need, how many weeks does the team beyond me here at the label need to get that music into the marketplace, set it up, to start to talk to Spotify and Apple Music about it. Hey, here's what's coming from Zach Williams next. It's coming out this date. We're going to want positioning for this and that. And so then they basically give me a date on when they need music to actually send it out to all the providers and all the entities that get the music out there. It's a lot of coordination.
Yeah.
And it's a lot, and dates shift. It's music, so sometimes we have dates on a calendar, and let's say an artist gets laryngitis or has vocal problems, and they can't sing all the songs, and that may delay us getting the project done, which may push the release date back, and or maybe we've only got half the songs written, and all of a sudden they've got writer's block, and we have to wait, and we don't have enough songs.
Yeah.
I mean, a bunch of things can happen to delay the process, but.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool to hear just how the whole label works together, all the different departments, because I think, especially for indie artists or songwriters, they think that, okay, an artist is going to put out a song and then it's just going to magically appear on Apple and Spotify and, wherever else. And that's not the way it works. Now, being an indie artist, that, you got to do it yourself. You don't have a team of people doing it for you. So yeah, you got to do that. But as far as like a signed artist, I don't think people realize that the coordination of a huge team of people, 35, 40 people that it takes to put those things out, and that you've got to call ahead and you've got to make appointments with Spotify and Apple and all these different places to coordinate for when those things are when they need to have the music ready so that they can get it out on time. Like that's even I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Yeah.
It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And talking about, streaming services and just social media and those types of things. I put out a question on my Facebook page, on the podcast page, just wanting people to kind of write in and ask questions of things that they're wanting to know about the music industry and that can help them as they're doing things. So I wanted to ask you this. This is from Jordan Lee Johnstone. Wants to know, what are your thoughts on Instagram these days to promote yourself and to let others see what you can do to possibly lead to future working opportunities? So he's a musician.
Is that question, he's a musician, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So how would is Instagram worth having as a musician, trying to get yourself out there for people to know who you are to get more chances to work?
I think without a doubt, yeah, it can be a positive tool for an artist or a musician. I think you gotta, it's basically a great way to promote yourself. I think you have to, obviously, at the end of the day, you got to be, you got to have a certain level of talent, I think, that people will go like, oh gosh, I'd like for that guy to come play guitar for me or play drums for me or background singer or whatever you do. But I think putting content out there to show people, what you do is a huge help. But I do think it comes down to, while that can be a help, it does come back to what you mentioned earlier, is just you still got to have some relationships and people still got to know who you are. I think from a touring musician standpoint, without a doubt, your playing ability is only part of the equation. Who you are as a person and how you conduct yourself and your personality are all equally, if not more so important than your musicianship and your playing ability. Because if somebody's going to hire you to be in their band or be on the road with them and ride around in a tour bus with them, you better be a good person. You better be a good hang. You better be somebody you can get along with people. You better be enjoyable to hang around with, because if you're not, if you're a pain in the rear out there on the road or in the bus, they're going to find somebody else to play drums or play guitar or whatever, because you're kind of like a bus or a van or whatever vehicle you're traveling in. It's kind of like your home.
Yeah.
And so if you're kind of the guy that gets on everybody's nerves all the time, dude, you're not family. We're gonna find somebody else that's as good a player as you or whatever you do, that's more enjoyable to be with, or represents you the way you want to be represented if you're the artist.
Right.
So I would say your social skills, your people skills, your general disposition is 100% as important as your playing ability.
Yeah, because musicians are a dime a dozen in a music
especially
town.
in Nashville.
Yeah, like you can throw a ball and hit a musician,
right?
And
a lot of really good ones,
and they're all amazing.
Yeah,
but they're not always the nicest people to be around necessarily.
Right.
So it's finding the people that you can get along with and hang out with, and so I completely agree with that.
Professionalism. What's interesting about the music business is it's obviously a creative field, so it's a little bit different than other industries. It's different than being a lawyer or a plumber or a salesman, or there's a creative entity to it. So that usually attracts a lot of people. Creative people, for the most part, tend to be a little scattered, maybe not quite as organized, maybe a little fly by the seat of your pants. That's some of the things that makes them a creative person.
Yeah.
But I think, and that's okay to be that way. But it's still a job. It's still a career. It's still an occupation. You have to be successful. You need to bring a certain level of professionalism to whatever you do, whether you're a musician or a singer or a merchandise salesperson or a road manager or whatever you do in this industry. You better bring some professionalism to it, or there'll be somebody else waiting to take your job in a heartbeat.
Yep.
And I think if you are professional and do the simple things like being organized, responding to emails and phone calls in a timely manner, being personable, having good communication skills, being punctual, all those kinds of things, which sounds simple. If you can do those things, you will set yourself apart. You definitely will, and you'll get noticed for those things.
Yeah, that's great. What is your favorite thing about being an A&R?
My favorite thing is signing new artists.
Okay.
I love there's something about signing a new artist. There's a little bit of a mentoring component to my role that I love. I'm somewhat of an encourager by nature, and I like to be an encourager. I like to help young artists find their way, whether it's helping them find the right team of people to songwrite with, or finding the right producer, or finding the right manager. Sometimes artists I sign don't even have managers yet, so I introduce them to several managers to see who might be a good fit for them. Mm-hmm. I love the hunt for a great song and just helping them, take a good song and maybe offering some feedback to help to tweak it, to make it great, make it better. I love just helping artists kind of find their way.
Yeah. How do you go about finding an artist to sign? Like, are you actively, obviously you're actively looking for them, but how do you go about looking to find an artist, and what makes you to say, I want that artist, I want to sign that person? Or do some of them find you, they reach out to you, or is that kind of a mixture of the two things?
A mixture of two things, but more times than not, it's usually, I would say, them finding me. Usually the artists that I get excited about come to me through other people I know in the industry, whether it be a manager that I know, or a concert promoter in a different part of the country, or another one of my artists heard an artist in another city and said, you need to check this person out. Or a music publisher will contact me about an artist that they've signed or have heard about. It's always usually a referral from somebody, from some other trusted source that's already within the industry.
Yeah.
I don't spend a ton of time, honestly, just randomly or blindly online looking for artists. I probably should spend a little more time doing that, or maybe have an assistant that does that for me. But I'm so busy managing my current roster, it's hard to find a lot of time to do that. And a lot of times, honestly, I did it more in the past, and it never really yielded too many things, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
So it's usually from a trusted source that I already know is how
comes back to relationships.
Yeah, it comes back to relationships and network of people. And, obviously I've been involved in this in various capacities for 23 plus years now. So I just know a lot of people, and they kind of know me, and yeah, it's kind of how it happens.
That's good. That's good to know. Man, thank you.
Yeah.
And it's great information. I think this is stuff that people need to know, and it's just really good stuff that people can apply to their lives and their careers.
Yeah.
So before we close out, what's some advice? I know we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but just overall, like as an artist, let's start with there's two things. I'm an artist that wants to sign with you guys. Mm-hmm. It's a Christian music artist. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be that. I mean, it doesn't. That's just for the context because that's what you do. Right. But as an artist in general, I want to get signed to a label. And you just mentioned that a lot of it's connections and people are referring people to so-and-so and back that gets to you. Mm-hmm. But does an artist ever reach out to you directly? And would you take into consideration that artist because of that, them taking the chance to do that specifically to you? Is that something that you guys would do?
They do reach out occasionally, but it's not as often as you would think. Well, first of all, let me say. So I'll talk about some things what do I look for in an artist that I get excited about, or that I would potentially sign. I mean, the thing about my job is my role here is to sign artists. Obviously, I think they're incredibly talented. Secondly, and maybe even more importantly, is do I feel like first of all, do they want to be in Christian music? Do they have a heart for Christian music? Do they have a heart for ministry, encouraging people, reaching people, loving people? That's a big part of what Christian music is and what we're about. Right. So I have to evaluate all those kinds of things. And then, but I have to say, okay, if I sign this artist, do I believe this artist has the talent level and all those other things I just mentioned to be successful on a national level, if not a worldwide level? Do I think they could be a big artist? Do I think a lot of people would love their voice, would love their songs, would really love what they do? And does it fit in the format of Christian music? There are record labels. Hopefully your artists realize this today, that you can go as an independent artist, and Marty, you're proving it yourself. You can have a career. You don't need a label to have a career as an artist. You can go farther than ever before in today's world through hard work and talent and the internet and social media. It takes a lot of work. You got to market yourself. You got to put yourself out there and make the phone calls and send the emails and do all the work. So you don't have, getting the record deal isn't like the end all be all, So, and really a record label is just, I equate it to like an engine that can help an artist kind of pour gasoline on what an artist is already doing. The artist has to be the driving force, and the label then can be champions to come around that artist and hopefully, take it to the masses, so to speak.
Right.
So I'm looking for, at the end of the day, what we do is a business. It's a weird thing. It's commerce meets creativity meets art. Yeah. And then what we do, you throw ministry in there as well, which can be, exciting and also complicated sometimes. But I have to hopefully sign artists that are financially profitable for this company. We're owned by Sony, and so we have to be profitable. We have to make money. Right. So I'm signing artists that I feel like, obviously, hopefully, are super talented, and yet that will, tons of people are going to want to hear their music and consume it and listen to it and enjoy it. I'm not going to go sign somebody that would be great on a country label, because we aren't a country label. That's not what I do. I'm not in country music. I'm not in pop music. I'm not in jazz music. I'm not in new age music, whatever. Right. What we do is Christian and worship. That's what we do. Yeah. And so just because a person is a person of faith or a follower of Jesus doesn't mean they're necessarily a fit for a label or a fit for Christian music. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I think sometimes artists who are Christians get frustrated because they don't feel like labels understand what they do, and they may be really talented, but they may not be a fit for the format. If you're an artist that's going to want to partner with a label, you really need to analyze, okay, who are the artists that are already on that label? Do I think I could fit in that artist family? Am I a fit with that? Do I do a similar thing? Yeah, I'm my own unique sound, but am I a similar thing? Mm-hmm. And do I think whatever radio format that label is attached to, can I hear myself in that radio format? Can I hear myself on country radio? Or can I hear myself on Christian radio or pop radio or whatever? If you don't think so, radio is still a driving force in launching and marketing artists. As much as changed in music in the last 10 years, radio is still a big force in the industry and how people discover music. Mm-hmm. At least on a large commercial level. So if you don't think your music is going to fit on Christian radio or be sung in churches on a Sunday morning, don't pursue Christian music. Go pursue what does your music fit? Are you a country artist? Are you a pop artist? whatever. Go pursue those partners and help those people, and try to get those people to help champion what you do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Backtracking just a little bit, go back to the question about the Instagram and just social media in general. Does that make a difference for you if an artist is really active on social media and they've got a lot of followers, that kind of thing? Does that tend to make you want to sign them more because they got more followers than someone who their music may be great and they're out doing it, but they don't necessarily have a lot of followers just because they don't really try to get that? That's not like their goal. Their goal is to make music and get out there, and not sit online all day long trying to get people to like their stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. At the end of the day, I think different A&R people would probably give you different answers, but I'll give you my answer is yes, I care about social media. I think if you're an artist trying to be an artist full time, you have to be engaged and involved and out there on social media. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm looking at an unsigned artist, it's not a make or break for me how many followers do you have or not have. At the end of the day, I look at the heart, the talent, the songs. Everything starts with that. I believe if somebody's great, if the talent is great, if the songs are great, they're going to find followers. They're going to gain followers. People are going to find out who they are. The music's going to resonate. It's going to connect. As opposed to, if I think somebody has all these followers, you can be a great online social media personality. Doesn't necessarily mean you're a great artist.
Right.
You might be entertaining. You might be charming. You might be good looking. Whatever. It doesn't necessarily translate into being a great artist. So, I mean, if they have great social media numbers, that's a bonus. Yeah. But I'm not going to not sign somebody if I think they're phenomenally talented because they have low social media numbers. And
Plus,
Zach Williams was an example of that. Zach, when I signed him, he was leading worship at a church. He had been in a Southern rock band years and years ago, but he had very little social media presence whatsoever. But I just was like, man, that dude with that voice, with those songs, I'm signing that guy. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's cool. And plus, you can buy likes all day long now.
You can buy that
it's
stuff.
Like it's all so fake anyway. It's like you can't really determine.
You can't always tell what's real and what's fabricated.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then as someone who wants to maybe get a job at a label, whether it be doing A&R or just working at a label in general, just to kind of get their foot in the door to work for a record label, what advice would you give for someone that wants to pursue that? Do they need to go to college first and get an internship because of that, or like can they just walk in the door and apply for a job, go online? Like what do you typically tell people for that?
That it's different every time. I think as an entry level, person who's a little bit younger and in their early 20s or so, I mean, I still always believe that having a college degree is a great thing. Do you have to have one? No, but so many people still want to work in the music business. A lot of times the bachelor's degree is kind of a weed out thing that companies will use. If you don't, it's like, if they don't at least have your bachelor's degree, we got so many applicants anyway. I'm gonna consider somebody who has their bachelor's over somebody that's just that doesn't. That's the line I'm gonna draw. So I still believe having a bachelor's degree in something is a benefit and says something to a company that, okay, they've got their degree, that's good, even if it's in English or history or whatever, Right. I still think there's great benefit in that. Again, I think if you're a young person coming out of college, you got to look for those entry-level opportunities. And a lot of times those are administrative kind of jobs, whether it's you're basically just, keeping track of people's calendars and assisting a marketing director or supporting, the head of radio, or you're basically, booking their appointments and keeping their calendar and maybe doing some, ordering lunch for a group meeting or, organizing a showcase behind the scenes, and hiring some, sound engineers and whatever. So it's a lot of administrative details kind of stuff.
Sure.
We've had a lot of young college graduates start out in those kind of jobs and do an excellent job, and they can then get promoted into, an associate marketing director or something like that, or go on the road, as I said earlier, as a merchandise manager, be excellent out there on the road and do that for several years, and then, transition to a tour manager or transition from that into a label, social media marketing rep here in the office or something like that. I feel like where there's some areas where there's real opportunity, I think, for younger people trying to get into the industry, anything that's related to video content, visual content. Mm-hmm. If you have any skills in video editing or behind a camera shooting things, I think video opportunities are all over the place for people that have talent in that area. I think there's, as I said earlier, in the merchandise world, and maybe you're a graphic designer and you end up working for a merchandise company and you design the logos on the T-shirts or that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of spots. But yeah, I do think the degree is important. Because I think what you can do then while you're getting your degree is you mentioned the internships. I think internships are incredibly valuable in the industry, and we hire interns all the time. Now in A&R, we don't hire interns that often because what I do is so independent and I'm moving around and doing so many different things. And a lot of what I do is so close to the artist that there's a lot of, confidential, I can't be playing, cruddy demos for, a college student that the artist doesn't want somebody to hear, So, marketing hires interns all the time. Radio department hires interns all the time. Our publishing company hires interns all the time. So getting the internships, that basically gives people at these companies a chance to get to know you, and it's like a test drive.
Yeah.
Okay, how would this person be inside of our company? Do they fit our culture? Do they follow through? Are they diligent? I mean, the one thing I can say about any shot you get in the music industry, and maybe this is obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway, is just be great at what you do. I don't care what job you have. If you think it's a menial, bottom of the totem pole task, do it with excellence.
Right.
Be great at it. Follow through, be professional, be on time, all those things I mentioned a little bit earlier. But you will advance if you just continue to be diligent and work hard. People will notice it, and you can grow and work your way up. But you also got to be patient. You can't just expect to walk in and do something for a year and get some big promotion. And it takes time.
Yeah.
It just takes time.
And all of those positions need to be filled. Somebody has to do all of those things that make a label run.
Right.
Or a publishing company or whatever it is. So, I think that's encouraging for people to know. It's like there are opportunities once you get inside a record label, music company, whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone has to start pretty much from the ground up.
Right.
And work your way up.
Right.
But everybody has to do it.
Right.
So.
Right. Just prove yourself where you are. And like I said, we have lots of people here that have started at the entry level and have proven themselves. And, a position comes open. You're going to be the first person, because you're already here, you're going to be one of the first people considered for that opening.
Sure.
And you may or may not get it, but you're going to get the first shot because they already know you and hopefully like you and think you're doing a great job in your current role.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, man, thank you again so much. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time and just to catch up. And
yeah,
this is great advice that people can apply to their lives and their careers, and hopefully somebody will do that.
Yeah,
so,
and let me say one more thing about the college degree thing too. I don't think you have to have. I don't have a degree in music business. There are a lot of colleges out there that offer these music business programs. I think there's some value in them. I'm not saying there's some really good programs out there.
Sure.
But some of them are also super expensive. And I think you got to weigh the cost benefit of, is it really worth paying, $50,000 a year to go get a music business degree? Man, I don't know. I mean, I would say that, you could go to another school and just get a straight up business degree and, find internships to do on the side. And I'm not a big believer in that you have to have a music business degree.
Right.
And I'm also not a believer in going into a bunch of debt to get your degree.
Of course.
I just want to say that to people that, if you can afford it to go to some big expensive school and get a music business degree, awesome. But if you don't have a lot of money, don't feel pressure to go into big time debt to go get a music business degree. Just get a business degree, and then supplement. Get your music experience outside of the classroom by interning and promoting shows in your local area or whatever.
And you're proof of that.
Yeah,
you just exact same thing that you did.
Exactly.
So people, here's living proof in front of me that it's possible to do that. Yeah. And probably a majority of the people, I would almost guess, are probably in that same boat.
Right.
Most people can't afford to go into huge amounts of debt, and I would never tell anybody to go into debt to do anything.
Exactly.
But more people are in the boat that we were in of doing something small, and then have music in your life and be around it and get in a position to where you can be around people and work with people that are doing that, and then work your way into it from there.
Exactly.
And I mean, people do it from both ways, and more than just those two ways, I'm sure.
Right.
But that's great advice. I appreciate that. So awesome.
Yep.
Well, again, thank you so much. It's great to talk to you.
Enjoyed it.
And have a great rest of the day.
You too, man.
Thank you all so much for hanging out with us and listening to our conversation with Blaine Barcus today. I hope you got lots of information and were able to take lots of notes. so that you can apply all of these things that we talked about today and put them into practice into your life and into your career. Remember, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. If you need consulting services via phone call, Skype, or FaceTime, be sure to let us know how we can help you begin to make a living in the music industry.